Iris, mother of Christopher, who I've been looking after, so thank you very much for doing this. For people who don't know what Pitt-Hopkins is, would you mind explaining what Pitt-Hopkins syndrome is?
Well, it's a neurological syndrome, so the children have normally global developmental delay, so they're very slow at reaching their milestones, like sitting or rolling, sitting, standing doesn't always can be even later, but crawling and walking, and most of our children at the moment are more or less non-verbal or have just a very few words.
So I've just prepared his food for him, which will go into the steamer, because his diet is very restricted and steaming is the best way to process his food.
And when did you notice something in Christopher?
Well, he's our second child, so we were worried, I was worried actually about certain things from when he was born. It looked like his face had got squashed, and he was a breech delivery, a cesarean, because he was breech, but he still came out the breech way, because I have a bicornuate uterus, so that can, my eldest son, Andrew, he came out with head kind of quite conical.
Ouch.
And they were worried till about 6 weeks. They just wanted to check out that it got back to normal size, and it did. So when Christopher's face seemed to look a bit different, I was worried that his nose had got squashed, but I've since known by lots of babies, that we've seen lots of babies' photos of children with Pitt-Hopkins syndrome now, that they have got quite a wide base, and so the nose does look like that. So I was worried about him from then, and he had a little cough that I was worried about that just didn't seem normal. And I couldn't understand why he kept getting ill when I wasn't doing anything different than I had done with Andrew. He was fully breastfed, and I was being careful about my diet, and I wasn't taking him anywhere, but he seemed to get a lot of infections. But from about 4 months onwards, I was getting increasingly concerned that he wasn't reaching, wasn't smiling, wasn't, all the different things you look for, especially when you've already got a child, and therefore also not just you've got your child, but you've got a lot more contact with other children. But no one, he passed all his developmental checks, and because I was concerned, I took him for them in the UK and in Germany, where we lived at the time. And at 9 months in the UK, he failed his hearing test, and I think it was 9 months, the health visitor was concerned, and she referred me to the GP, and she actually went with me to the appointment, and the GP said, "Oh no, it's fine, no, you come back in so-and-so time and you'll see that he's caught up."
Yeah.
So, but he didn't.
When was he diagnosed? Because you've had that feeling for quite a while. So what age was he diagnosed with Pitt-Hopkins syndrome?
Oh, he wasn't diagnosed with Pitt-Hopkins until he was almost 16.
Oh wow, that is quite a long time to wait. Obviously his development was slightly delayed. How delayed would you say was it?
He was very delayed, but that first year, although I took him to, say, doctors in both countries, and to some other people as well, I was being told, that he was a heavy, lazy baby, and I was an over-anxious mother, and he also saw a paediatrician in the UK. Andrew had an appointment about sort of mild asthma, and I asked this doctor what he thought, and he literally just held for me. It wasn't an official appointment, but he's, "Oh no, look, his leg happened to come down because Christopher wasn't bouncing. You hold a little baby up and they like to bounce on their legs. He wasn't doing that. He wasn't sitting, and if you tried to sit him, he would throw himself backwards, and I just knew that wasn't normal, but I couldn't get anyone to believe me. And then I happened to have to see my obstetrician and gynaecologist, and he held him for me while I was doing something for him, and then he said, "What's wrong with Christopher?" And I said, "Well, you tell me what's wrong." I said, "No one believes me there's anything wrong." He said, "There's something seriously wrong. Did something go wrong with cesarean?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, have you seen a neurologist?" And I said, "No, why would we see a neurologist?" And he said, "Well, you should have done because you had a cesarean." But I'd had a cesarean back in England. Apparently in Germany, though no one told me, if you have a cesarean they like to follow up. But unfortunately the GP I was seeing didn't tell me that, and no one was concerned in the UK either, except my health visitor. So at a year, I finally had a doctor that agreed with me, and then you can go to other people and say, "Look, this doctor agrees with me, or this doctor's also concerned, please can you have a look?" And we were sent somewhere, but again it was very difficult because we weren't really sure who we were meant to be asking for. In another country you don't have all the kind of technical words. So we went to see someone, and they basically said they couldn't tell us anything. And then we heard that we needed to try to get an appointment at the Kinderzentrum or somewhere like the Kinderzentrum. So I rang them up in my very broken German, and they basically said to me that it was for disabled children. But the word there is gehandicapt, or that's here, but something very similar. And I basically had to say, "But I believe my child has got," as we would say, special needs, which was a very hard thing to do when you've got a year-old baby and everyone's telling you for months and months there's nothing wrong, you know.
Yeah.
So we're kind of thinking, well, it can't be that serious, can it? If no one's believed us all this time and making out we're kind of being over anxious and there's nothing wrong. But we managed, we were trying to get an appointment, and I was a La Leisure League leader, and so I was seeing lots of other La Leisure League people and other leaders as well. And there was one mother who had for many years gone into different hospitals to help with the children, which I had done as well, but her and more official, well, I suppose I was official, but she was much more experienced than I was. And she contacted the Kinderzentrum, and a doctor there who had called her in to help with a child with Down syndrome. And so she had her contact, and she said, this mother's trying to get an appointment, she's not really getting anywhere, is there any way you can help? And she said, "Oh, well, actually we've had a cancellation." And I think it might have been, in my mind I've got 3 weeks, I'm not sure whether that was 3 weeks I was going to have to wait, or she got me in 3 weeks, I can't really remember, but we got in to see her, and basically she said that he had a development in his legs of a 4-month-old and in his arms of a 4 to 6 week old, so that is in movements, the kind of things he should have been doing. And we had a few more appointments. I can't quite remember at what point, whether it was that first time or the next time, but they said he may never walk, he may never talk. I think it was the first appointment actually. And then she basically described Christopher as, she said that normally in a normal development of a child, the hardware is all sort of set down like a computer in that first year, and after that it's all the software goes in, all the different things the children learn, but the sort of main kind of developmental things like walking, most walk around the year, and all the sort of other developments that a child's going through is very important that very first year. And Christopher hadn't got that development, and he should have been having help to get that with physiotherapy, with occupational therapy, or ergotherapy as it's known there and here. He missed out, and she said he was like at the bottom of a dark hole. We had to try to help him out of this dark hole, and she sent us along to try to think if we'd actually seen another therapist at that point, a physiotherapist. I think I'd gone along to another. What happened is that my GP who apparently we shouldn't have been seeing. We should have been seeing a paediatrician, but we didn't know that because in the UK you saw a GP to do your developmental checks. But he didn't tell us that, and he hadn't. Well, I went to him and said I wanted physiotherapy. Someone said to me, maybe physiotherapy will help. And he basically started shouting at me and slamming on the table, telling me in German that this child did not need physiotherapy. And they went, oh, okay, and he gave me a prescription for physiotherapy, which you had to get from a doctor.
Yeah.
And I then tried to see, I managed to see, literally cycled round with Christopher straight away to someone that could give me an appointment. And he was a year old, and Christopher couldn't even roll. And looking at it now, again, I can understand how shocked they were. But if you knew how many doctors I'd been to and how many people I'd asked, it's absolutely ridiculous that he was that age and couldn't even. I was having to hold him with two arms. You should normally have to hold a child on your hip at that age.
Yeah.
I was having to hold him like that because he would just flop backwards. And the physiotherapists there were really shocked, and they said we can't help you. You need a specialist. And I again got on the bike with Christopher with the tricycle, but the only one I could balance him, and cycled straight down round to this lady, and she couldn't give me an appointment for about 5 days. Which I know it's only 5 days, but at the time just seemed an eternity.
Yeah.
And I took him in and tried to get an appointment. And when we did get the appointment, she just sort of shook her head and she said, "You mothers, why don't you take them for their developmental checks?" And I almost threw the books at her, the one I had from the UK and the one I had from Germany, and I said, "Of course I took him for his developmental checks." And then she just read them and she said, "But he's not said anything. He shouldn't have done that. He literally, I didn't know how they were meant to be done. I'd never seen a baby's book. And he just ignored his questions. He should have asked me, but he didn't bother because his German, my German wasn't good enough at that point. Not that it ever got that much better. His English wasn't very good. So rather than say, really, this isn't working, it's better that you find someone else to do these tests, he just carried on taking the money and just not doing his job.
That's ridiculous.
And because he wasn't concerned, in England they thought I was being a bit petty, taking him there as well, because he'd already had his checks in Germany. So they weren't taking me seriously. But when she really saw what had been happening, she was obviously horrified. And then we started this Breare therapy. But this Breare therapy I learnt from other people, mainly from the breastfeeding group, that some children later on in life, these are children that don't have any cognitive problems, but they don't know at that stage when they're so tiny, actually had to have therapy because of, psychotherapy, because of what you had to do to the children, because you have to get them into different positions, and they're supposed to be like pushing pressure points or something, and until they react, you're trying to get a kind of muscle response, I suppose. I'm not quite sure. I should read a lot about it again, but it was upsetting at the time, and I didn't have the internet then, so still had to go to libraries, and again, which I did do. I went walking in the snow with dragging Andrew along and pushing Christopher in a buggy through thick snow all over Munich, trying to find somewhere that might have something in English about Breare. And I found about that much in a reference book somewhere in a university, somewhere in the middle of Munich. So we did this therapy with him until we found an alternative. But I think probably about 9 months we did it with him. And that's what the Kinderzentrum wanted us to do. And the Kinderzentrum said we should do this 4 times a day. You have to take all his clothes off, so it was free, nappy area, and then it was most important to stimulate him in that half an hour following. But the trouble was, Christopher would be screaming. This was a child who didn't cry.
Yeah.
But he did this therapy with him, and he screamed and was inconsolable. And the whole time I'm thinking, there's more and more of this minute going, 30 minutes going, and I'm losing the time. And I didn't know how to stimulate him. She didn't tell me. Sometimes you think, what do they think we know? And say in those times, now of course you could Google it and everything, but you couldn't then. So and I said to him, how, next appointment, I said, how am I going to stimulate him? She said, do clapping with him, do singing with him, but I thought, I didn't know how long, what. And then a friend of Brian's at the office has a child with Down syndrome, and she had a book, and I think she had the video, or I managed to get the video, and it was a book about Bibic, which is a place in England for brain injured children. It's a British Institute of Brain Injured Children, I think it was. And this video talked about different activities you could do. You went along with the child, they'd study the child, and then they'd make a program for what that child needed, and then you would take them back and they'd see what else he needed and alter the program. So we were looking into that. In fact, we actually went along and visited, because they suggest you visited first, and heard a little bit more about it and went to a lecture about it, I think. And we were considering trying to get there, or we were going to, we wanted to do something, when we found out a friend came over who just moved down to Monmouth in Wales, and she'd heard of a place called St Rivals, which was in her village, or very nearby. I think it was actually in her village. And it seemed very similar. And she went in and talked to them and found out about it for us. And we made an appointment there because she said, Sue, then you can come and stay with me. And, you won't, because to get to Bibic, we really needed to drive, and it would have been very, very difficult for me to do that with Christopher and then Andrew. So we went for 2 years to this place in Bibic where they made a program of therapy for us and told us a lot more about what developmental delay was, and they were great. And in that time they said to us, well, we're not going to tell you to stop doing Voiter. They said that's not for us to do, but we think you will stop. You'll find an alternative. They said because it won't be easy to continue doing Voiter therapy and doing our activities. And it was right. As soon as we knew, we were doing a program of therapy with patterning and different things like that, which is like putting the children through falling motions and rolling him and doing a lot of work on his vestibular system and proprioception. We did a lot of massage. Not that I actually knew at the time exactly what it all was, but we knew we were doing the best. Once we'd done that, we knew we'd done all we could for him. And then you could relax and feel like, okay, experts have told us this is what we need to do, and once we've done it, then that, it's a lot of work. It was probably about 4 hours a day in the end, but which may not have been the best thing, but we didn't know that at the time. We very quickly decided we weren't going to do Voiter, and we managed to find another physiotherapist who didn't do Voiter, because Voiter was very strong in very big thing in Munich in particular. I don't know about the rest of Germany, but we managed to find a therapist who did Bopal, which was a much gentler thing. It was like on balls, rocking and things like that.
you believe your child may have Pitt-Hopkins syndrome? Like any features, similarities?
The fact that they have developmental delay, particularly if someone's considered Angelman syndrome, or if it's a girl Rett syndrome, but they kind of don't seem typical. There's lots of facial features. Our children normally have quite a bottom lips quite full. The top lip is what they know as Cupid bow.
Yeah.
Kind of, like what people would love to have. They've normally got quite deep set eyes and high cheekbones, which actually is why some of them are called Pitt handsome. Their eyebrows are quite distinctive, and it's particularly thicker here. Their ears are kind of cupped, and I think they're a bit more low than others, and their nose is kind of broader. When they're older, it can be quite beaked. I'm trying to think if I've got. There's a photo over there. There's kind of a cartoon of him. Maybe you could take a photo later and cut into it.
Maybe, yeah.
And you can see how the eyebrow. That cartoonist didn't. That was at the EPO when they used to do them at Christmas. They didn't know that. He didn't know that Chris had Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, but he picked up those features.
Yeah.
And some of the children tend to have. Well, it's one thing. I mean, we all laugh when we see it, but the children tend to sit like this. But my legs like this, like up there, but they're right down.
Right.
Oh, we've got pictures of them, kind of, all sitting in a row, and they've done that. It seems they find that comfortable. So that they're normally quite low tone. And some hypermobility. When they're walking, they often, if they are, they're delayed walking, but their foot will go over, and they'll normally be advised to have AFOs. Christopher didn't get AFOs till he was 18. We couldn't get them. Found out later it was because the person that the doctor was asking, who did the shoes, was like a rival company. So we're not very pleased about that, but he eventually got them. But a lot of the other children get them really, really early on, just little ones, inserts, but that support that ankle.
Hi, Christopher.
He is so tired. I don't know what they've been doing. He's at the the town where you're getting off the bus today. Hey, you were sitting here with a door open. Yesterday they were wiping the hand that we running sloppily. He's at the moment. He's at the Belavings group.
Yeah.
And it's started in a new place this week.
Yeah.
And he's outside a lot, and he's come home absolutely exhausted.
I'm not surprised.
Are children with Pitt-Hopkins more susceptible to illness and viruses?
Well, a lot of the children, like Christopher, do get a lot of. Some of them aspirate. TCF4, which is having haploinsufficiency of TCF4, is what causes Pitt-Hopkins syndrome. Is known to be to do quite a lot to do with the immune system, and we were Christopher was in a research project, not for Pitt-Hopkins syndrome but for TCF4, and his immune system works differently. Now that could vary from child to child depending on mutation or deletion, but they definitely do seem to be a bit more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And Christopher was pretty healthy. I say that first few months he was unhealthy, but one of the things Pitt-Hopkins syndrome did was send us to a homeopath who was a doctor. A lot of doctors are homeopaths. I have been a doctor and then have done a homeopathic course, and this is what he had done. But he was particularly interested in developmental delay. So she asked us, basically they were talking about giving Christopher an immunoglobulin injection or infusion, I'm not sure, to sort of help his
Immune system
build up. And they said, but before we do that, we'd like you to go and see Dr. Binns. So we did. And Christopher only once after that ever had antibiotics, and that was here in Holland. When he was about 11 or 12, he suddenly came out of blisters all over his feet. In fact, we were in England it happened, but we'd only been in England a day or so, and it literally just came up. We were like just there a weekend for some therapy. We came back and took him to the doctor, and the doctor was very concerned, rang up a skin specialist at the Leiden at LUMC, and basically it was known as impetigo bullosa, and there had been 5 cases that day on the phone, so it probably stemmed from a swimming pool in Vorskota. And he said he must go on antibiotics because Christopher was always sucking his fingers. He could have been touching his feet, and the GP was very concerned that
it could go into his system.
Yeah, and his throat could swell up if we didn't know. So he had antibiotics then, but we insisted that he had probiotics, and he didn't even know what probiotics were. So we went to the apotheke, and she said, I'm going to give him a talking to, fancy not knowing what probiotics are, and she made sure we had a good probiotic. Because every time Christopher was on antibiotics, he was actually, used to be more ill with the result of the antibiotics, because he used to completely give him, he used to not give him diarrhoea or anything like that, he never got that bad, but it definitely caused a lot of gas and a lot of pain. And it would take weeks to get over that because the antibiotics were messing up the flora in his guts. So that time it wasn't so bad, but that's the only time he's ever been on antibiotics. And yeah, say some have aspiration, a lot seem to get pneumonia. Yeah, I think their immune system compromised, but it's not really. There's not been enough research to say. You don't know whether it's daycare, whether it's just unfortunate. The very fact they're not moving so much, but they're early on, things are more likely to sit on. They're more likely to things to develop.
Yeah.
But Christopher would say been so fortunate. Some of the children have a lot of seizures. Then the medication they're on for seizures, or medication they're on, some of them have reflux, and other side effects can cause other health problems sometimes when they're so young.
Yes. Am I okay to have your shit? Yes, thank you. So how was your day at daycare? Can I have your sock, please? Well done. Can I have your sock, Christopher? Is that okay? Thank you very much. You've talked a little bit about why it took so long to even make people believe that something wasn't quite right. But why does it take so long to actually diagnose him with this syndrome? Because 16 years is a very long time. So how come it took 15 more years to have a name for what was going on?
Well, basically, it actually took a few months, in that the blood test wasn't available before then. So we were incredibly fortunate that he was probably the first that I know of, first boy in the UK to be diagnosed, even though we were living in Holland, but first English child. There was another girl who was diagnosed a month or so before him, but that was a girl, not a boy. And I've not yet, it might be, but I've not yet over the years heard of anyone else. So we were very fortunate, we were in the right place at the right time. But yeah, the blood tests came out sometime in sort of early summer, I think, 2007, so 10 years ago. And he was diagnosed in the October. That's when the blood test results came back. I think his blood may have gone in July. So at that point, from what Brian's explained to me, what they were using to test was very expensive, and so they were waiting like for a batch, and they do a batch and use a test.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe a batch of 10 at the time. So that's probably why it wasn't till the October we heard. And there were different centres. Some went to Paris, a little girl in England, I think her blood went to Paris. So there were just a very few in that time, and so he was one of the first. We thought they said he was one of 60 because when we went along, but we realised later, we just kept thinking, where are these other 60 people? But when we had access to papers that were written later, because when we were speaking to them, the papers hadn't been written, we realised they were probably saying one of 16.
Very small. That's one of your favorites.
And if you want to find out more about Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, where should you go?
Well, we've got a free app, which is available on the App Store. Just look under any App Store, Windows or iOS or whatever they are now, and just look up Pitt-Hopkins, which is P-I-T-T, then Hopkins, H-O-P-K-I-N-S, or our website, which is www.pitthopkins.org.uk.